America. Our national future, no less, now depends on MPs of different views listening, compromising and making deals. Is that possible? I'm joined by three absolutely key backbench figures, by the former Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, the Labour Chair of the Brexit Select Committee and former Business Minister, Hilary Benn, and Anna Soubry, who is an enthusiast for another referendum. Let me ask you all about your positions. Before I do that, Hilary Benn, it's in your office tomorrow that these alleged backbench plotters are gathering in order to seize back control of the Commons agenda from the executive. Can you explain in clear terms what you're about and why?
Well, MPs doing their job, Andrew, are not plotters. They are trying to sort out the mess that the Prime Minister has created. We are facing a national crisis. And there are many MPs in the House of Commons whose first priority is to ensure that we do not leave without a deal. And therefore, finding ways when we come to table amendments this week and debate on the 29th of January, how we stop that if the Prime Minister won't listen to the call she's having from all quarters in all parties to stop a no-deal Brexit, then MPs have to do the job if the Prime Minister is not capable of doing so. Can I also say that to attack House of Commons clerks and suggest they're part of a conspiracy is a disgrace. Our clerks are resolutely impartial. They act with complete integrity. And when MPs go to them and say, I'd like to do this, can you advise me on how to do it? That's the advice they give. And we really cannot get into a situation where people are suggesting that the clerks of the House of Commons are doing anything improper. They too are doing their job.
Anna Soubry, why do you think, how is it that we know what the clerks are thinking? Do you think?
I don't know, but it is exceptionally concerning because my understanding is that this is a quite proper exchange of emails between Dominic Raab and a clerk who, as Hilary says, is doing their job. They always give members of Parliament impartial advice, and we need to know on what basis that has been put into the public arena. Remember, Dominic is also the chairman of the Security Committee, and if it turns out that his emails have been hacked, and I don't see any other way, because it seems inconceivable that it would have been shared, but we really have to stop this narrative. This is not people plotting, as Hilary quite rightly says. This is people doing their job because of a profound failing by government. And if government won't do its job, then Parliament has to take this back. And if I may say, I think your viewers are fed up with all these half-baked conspiracy theories. They're fed up with Brexit. They're wanting to know what our solutions are. And working together is actually a good thing.
All right, Dominic Raab. However, a lot of people will read these stories this morning and believe that MPs are trying to stop Brexit by sort of complicated procedural means.
Well, I read the stuff in the Sunday Times. I don't know anything really much about it. What I do know is that as a matter of international law under the Lisbon Treaty and now domestic law, we are set to have 2 years of negotiations. We've triggered Article 50 and then we leave. So I think it's going to be very difficult as a matter of law, and notwithstanding all the differences and shades of opinion on the Remain side, to actually subvert what is the default option. My view would be that after the biggest parliamentary defeat in history, the Prime Minister should go back, look at the backstop with the EU, make clear we're transitioning to a best-in-class free trade agreement. For those of us that want a deal, and I do, then that's the best opportunity we've got to deliver one. Otherwise, we will leave on the 29th of March. I'm pretty confident about that.
Good, because I want to come on to the detail now, the substance. Hilary Benn, first of all, I'm trying to avoid jargon about Norways and Canadas and pluses and minuses and all of that, but you basically want us to leave the EU and then have a very close relationship in terms of trade and indeed the customs agreement as well.
I think we have to compromise because Parliament is deadlocked and the Prime Minister can't get round that. And I favour having a close economic relationship, as you described, remaining in a customs union. Well, let's start with a customs union, because the Prime Minister said, come and talk. But as you reported earlier, her mind appears to be completely closed. Well,
just quoting you.
Well, I know you were, but these talks will get nowhere in those circumstances. So if the Prime Minister is not prepared to move on that basic question, should we remain in a customs union, which is an essential precondition to keeping an open border in Northern Ireland and keeping friction-free trade, which businesses rely on, that is a starting point. But I'm also in favour of Parliament having the chance to vote on a series of options to see if there is a majority that can command support.
The big problem with this is that it retains free movement of people, which I assume, Dominic, you would not regard as a proper Brexit.
Well, it's not just me. Dominic Raab we've been talking about him on the Remain side, had an article in the Sunday Times saying from a democratic point of view, it is particularly poor. So no, I don't think it's a good idea. And during the campaign, the referendum campaign, on both sides, Leave and Remain, everyone said it was the worst of all worlds. But I'll let Hilary make the staunch defence.
Well, sorry, we're talking about the customs union, which is, of course, nothing to do with free movement. That's the single market. And Hilary's point is,
but he wants
can
a
we...
single market too, a lot of it.
Well, I don't
in or as close a relationship as we can have.
And I think that there lies the problem, and as you know, and your viewers know, that's been the great conundrum, because you can't choose your four freedoms, and so you're either in the single market or you're out.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Can I just ask both of you very quickly, do you think that if the Prime Minister said, do you know what, I'm prepared to move on the customs union, we would then have a deal that could get through the House of Commons and be accepted by the EU?
Two problems as I foresee them. First of all, I don't think that Labour will ever vote for what they will call a Tory Brexit. I think that's a simple political reality. The second point is on the customs union. As you know, I have made the case for both the customs union and the single market for the reasons that Hilary identifies solves the problem in Northern Ireland, is the best thing for British business. I think that the problem now is that majority has gone in the House of Commons. I don't think we will settle on it, and the customs union by itself won't be the best thing for British business without this thing called the regulatory alignment, which is critical. Okay, that's why I want a people's vote. I want this now to go back to the British people. That amendment will be tabled. We now need to get Jeremy Corbyn to support it.
Dominic Raab is sitting there silent. There are too many Dominics in this conversation. I'm not being personal, but everyone seems to be called Dominic. Almost everyone.
Apart from the three of us.
Apart from the three of us. In the wider conversation. Nonetheless, you've been observing this with a smile on your face, I suspect, because here we have two versions of people who are against the government's Brexit deal. One wanting a close relationship post-Brexit and one wanting another referendum. And unless you two can agree and find common cause, you are going to be split in the Commons too, and the Commons will not come to an agreement.
Well, I think the Commons will come to an agreement, but we're not going to leave on the 29th of March without a deal.
Exactly right.
I think that is the first thing. Secondly, if the Prime Minister doesn't shift on more than a customs union, there isn't going to be an agreement. And as someone who has not been calling for a second referendum, because I think we have an obligation to try and honour the first, if in the end, Andrew, Parliament remains deadlocked, then there is no other way, it seems to me, of resolving this other than by going back to the people and say, what do you think?
I was going to ask all of you where you can compromise, but you can compromise by coming towards Anna on a second referendum or another referendum.
If he's deadlocked.
Can you compromise with him?
With who? With
Hilary.
Well, you could see the common ground that exists.
I know, but you want another referendum under all circumstances.
Yes, but I also want a deal on the ballot paper there as well. And if it's Mrs May's deal, I would vote for Theresa's deal. I know many others would, if it's part of a referendum. And equally, if we had Norway in some form, I'd put that on the ballot paper with Remain.
So there is crossover here. Dominic Raab, I suppose if I was sitting in number 10, I'd be saying this is the problem that people like you who voted down the Prime Minister's deal now have. You hear them, it's perfectly possible that you will lose Brexit completely.
I don't think that's right. And by the way, it was the biggest parliamentary defeat in history. Yes. And I think it reflects a lot of the frustration in the public at large. The reality is, as a matter of EU law, and we've heard from Guy Verhofstadt this morning, the idea that we're going to delay Article 50 for more than a few weeks is not politically on the table. I actually think the Prime Minister should rule it out. I think what your viewers, whether they voted Leave or Remain, now want to see is some finality. So yes, let's go back to the EU, see if we can get those two changes that I mentioned on the backstop, clear movement, transition to a free trade agreement. If not, let's get this done. Let's respect the referendum, not reverse it, and let's move on, because I think people are mightily tired of the ongoing haggling. And I was smiling because I respect Anna and Hilary. People want this done. That's what's written in law. Let's get it done.
Let me pick you up on a couple of things you just said. You would clearly, the easiest thing for the Prime Minister is she goes back to Brussels the next few days and says we've got to bin this backstop. We have a really big change in the backstop, and they agree.
I think there needs to be an exit mechanism, and do
you think it's plausible that they would give us that?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, actually, it would have been easier back in July. I had, as you know, the conversation.
But you couldn't negotiate it then, to be fair. You couldn't negotiate it when you were in government. She has now lost her deal by 230 votes. Why is it easier for her to negotiate it now?
Not correct. We didn't go into bat. My advice was that we should. There was an opening. The Prime Minister did not take that advice. I think it's later and therefore harder now. You always lose time in a negotiation. You lose a bit of leverage. But there's still an opportunity because it's focusing minds on the EU side. But that's our best chance of a deal. And I think actually it's the best chance of rallying the support. Remember, the people voting the deal down overwhelmingly, and some Remainers, overwhelmingly were Brexiters. They want this delivered, and so do the British people.
So just before we leave that, did the Irish government ever say to you that it's possible that that kind of deal could be struck, that you could get an exit mechanism?
I met with Simon Coveney, and I want to respect the integrity, but it was very clear he wasn't ruling things out. They got ruled out when Leo Varadkar, who is less moderate than Simon Coveney, and for him, the real issue is that they've taken this incredibly deeply political view on the backstop, which is got nothing to do with the realities of solving and avoiding a return to the hard border. And now we need to make sure that there's a ladder for them to climb down.
This is pretty disingenuous.
Dealing with the backstop doesn't solve the main problem, which is our future economic relationship is completely uncertain, and it's because the Prime Minister has resolutely refused to face up to the choices that confront the country.
One way through this that has been talked about.
And she would not compromise in the past when she's had many opportunities. I do think that's incredibly important.
The problem here is not that the UK is not compromised, it's we haven't taken a robust enough line with the EU. And that's what most people want to see happen.
We haven't faced up to the choices. We are in a terrible mess because of the failure of people, I have to say, Dominic, like your good self, in government. Look, we've got a cabinet that is utterly divided.
But it's dominated by Remainers.
No, it is not because of that. It is because of a failure, I'm afraid to say, of leadership, facing up to the realities of Brexit and seeking a compromise from the outset, as opposed to at the 11th hour.
I'm not sure how a second referendum faces up to the realities of Brexit.
It does, absolutely, and it provides real choice.
Can I just ask the two Conservatives on that elegant sofa? It's been talked about that we could have another general election shortly. How could the two of you possibly stand on the same manifesto? Listening to you, you couldn't, could you?
And I didn't actually stand on our party's manifesto in 2017. The last thing we want is a general election, not just because it hangs out the prospect of a Corbyn, God help us, government, but also it wouldn't solve anything. And I think that's the most important thing.
Andrew, from my point of view, we're one family in the Conservative Party and we do need to unite. But the truth is that's much more difficult unless we get Brexit done, which is why I think that for the Conservative Party and for the public at large, we need to get it delivered and then we move on and the country moves on.
Because as Hilary absolutely rightly observes, the whole point is we've only got this withdrawal agreement. The promised trade deal, which sets out our future, has barely begun. And so the ideal that take this deal or crash out without a deal and the arguing stops is for the birds. It's just the beginning of it.
It's the divisions within the Conservative Party, everyone knows that, has got us into this mess. Jeremy Corbyn offered to talk to the Prime Minister quite some time ago, and she refused to take him up on the offer. And if her mind remains closed, it's no good pretending you're trying to reach out, because she has to shift if we're to see any possibility of a compromise.
Hilary, your party is appallingly divided, and with respect to you, and indeed Keir, who I know is sitting here, you do have in Jeremy Corbyn the worst leader of the opposition that we've ever had. But to his credit, he has taken his party to a position through your conference of supporting a second referendum, a people's vote. He has now got to deliver it because it's going to go down as an amendment. It will be voted on, and Labour have got to get behind it.
Let's hear from Hilary. Do you think that Jeremy Corbyn, under any circumstances, is really going to vote for a second referendum?
Well, the Labour policy is very clear. If in the end all of the alternatives have gone, if we don't have a general election, if we can't reach an agreement in the House of Commons, then all options on the table, as Keir, from whom you'll hear in a moment, will no doubt say. Right. And in those circumstances, the question for everybody is, what other way is there of resolving this without going back to the British people?
We've had an elegant and civilised conversation, but I think it's fair to say there hasn't been a lot of consensus here. Thank you very much indeed. Now look at what's coming up straight after this programme.